friends, welcome back. I wanted to talk to you about what we learned this week 6 in PRIDE training. PRIDE stands for Parent Resources for Information Development and Education. So week 6 was all about continuing family relationships. So again, sorry if I'm looking down, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything for you guys. We talked a lot about the youth and their family connections this week, kind of building on other weeks, but just really driving the importance of the connections to not only their family, their existing circle of people, their culture, their race, how important that is, and what, no matter what their path is through foster care, they stay in foster care, they be adopted, they be returned home, keeping those connections strong is invaluable. We talked a lot about why reunification is the most important goal. No matter what the family situation is, why reunification? And guys, I'm going to tell you again, I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. If you cannot support reunification and you are fostering only to hopefully adopt one day and for no other reason than that, then do not get into foster care, because that is everybody, the agency, the family, that is everybody's prime purpose, and that should be your prime purpose as well. If you want to be a family to fall back on if a child cannot be returned home, which is what we are, then yes, foster care is something you pursue. But if you're strictly doing it only for the hopes that the child that you have will be able to be adopted, then, and you can't support reunification, then just don't even get into it, guys. We talked about how the reunification process works when it does come to that, how we kind of transition the kids home, just different examples of what that might look like. We talked a lot about the process of how moving a child or youth from a foster family back to their home, how that might affect the child, and what resources we have available to us to help with that, because the child gains such a great loss being removed from their biological family and put into this foster family. And then to go back, they've now been accustomed to the foster family's routines, rituals, things that they do on a day-to-day basis. And, they now love the foster mom, the foster dad, the foster siblings. Those bonds have been created. So now to take them away from that and move them back into their own family, it's still a huge loss for them. So if you can stay connected and build relationships with their family, it is going to only benefit the child. One of our foster daughters went to a kin home, a family friend home to live, and she has been so great with us, letting us be able to connect with her still and kind of keeping us updated. And she said to me, a child can never have too much love. And, that just really resonated with me, and it's so true. I've never met a bio family that doesn't love their child. They have obstacles. They may struggle with addictions, abuse, poverty, homelessness. They may struggle, but I've never met one that doesn't love their child. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. That may that may be the case, but it's very few and far between if it is. They love their child so much, and this child comes to live with you, and you love that child so much, and maybe they go to a kin placement, somebody else who is fighting for them within the family circle, and they love that child so much. So this child gets love from so many places. So being able to keep the lines of communication open and being able to stay connected even when they return home, we really talked a lot about the importance of that this week. We talked about what the implications of making a child part of your own family forever, like a permanent adoption, the implications of that and how that affects your family, positive and negative. You can't send a child back just because it doesn't work out and it's not what you think. When you sign those adoption papers, you're in it for the long haul. I know I've heard stories where people do that, and I just think that's absolutely terrible. No matter how difficult the child may be, you really have to go into it with open eyes to begin with, and if you can't, then you can't make that commitment in the first place, because if you try and go back on that commitment, there's irreversible damage to that child. I actually have one of my best friends, someone in her family adopted a little 3-year-old through the foster care system. He already had crown wardship, and they adopted him, and then her husband left her, and he gave up all rights to the child. And this is 5-6 years later now, and the child still asks for him and doesn't understand why he's not there and why he doesn't love him anymore. And the damage it's done to this little guy is, thankfully he has an amazing mom and aunt and grandma and, you know, just a support system around him. But the fact that he lost his first family and then he lost his dad, like, it's not fair that a little soul should have to go through that. So you just need to know what you're getting into, and, you know, they just really kind of drove that home this week. We talked a lot about multiple transitions, and, you know, we've really been struggling with that recently, because there's been times that we think that our current foster placement is not the best fit for our home, and, you know, I don't think it is 100% the best fit for our home. There's a lot of attention required, a lot of individual attention that, as a mom of 4 little people under 5, it is very hard for me to do. But, you know, learning about how moving multiple times, how it affects these kids, I just can't do it to him. And we are, you know, God gave them to us for a reason, so he thinks it's the best for our home. And what do I know when God put them here? No matter how hard it is and how much we struggle, we are learning lesson after lesson, and it's only making us better, not only foster parents, but just parents in general. And I can't be another adult to give up on him, and I can't just move him to another home just because, you know, another placement might be easier for me. So we talked a lot about that, and it's really coming to fruition for me right now. We talked about what the planning practice is, what the court system kind of goes through, you know, what happens usually at the first court date, second court date, third court date, obviously depending on so many factors, but just, you know, kind of the timeline that they give you. I'm not sure if I've said this in videos before, but children under 6, the Ontario guideline or the Ontario law is that they have to have a plan of permanency within 1 year, and children over 6 have 2 years to have a plan of permanency. So this doesn't mean that they are placed in their forever home at the 1 year mark, but that plan has to be put into place. So, for example, our second foster placement, the one I was just speaking about with, that's living with Kim, she was with for 4 months. She's been in her kin home for 6 months, or coming up to 6 months, and she's going on to her year of when she was removed from her family. So I actually just found out she's being returned to mom, and that is the plan of permanency. So I don't know if it's going to work. If she'll end up back in kin care, back in foster care, back with me, I don't know. But the plan is that she's going home, which is great. I don't know much about the case anymore, but if mom has done what she needs to do to get her back, that is awesome. I really hope she has, because I love that little girl fiercely, and I just only hope and wish and pray for the best for her. But they're coming up to that year mark, so the plan of permanency had to be put in effect. But she was in foster care, kin care for a full year. We also talked about ways to prevent placement. CAS, I didn't know this, it's actually there. The families that are actually in care is something like, it's under 10% that the families that they deal with are actually in care. So there's 90% of the families that they work with, they're working with, you know, inside their home or with different resources, that sort of thing. There's only 10% of the families that are actually in care. So I found that to be really interesting. So they told us kind of ways to prevent placement when CAS gets involved, what they kind of do to prevent a child from coming into care in the first place. We talked a lot about adoption search and what the search process looked like, and the matching process once a child has been placed with Crown Ward. Not, like I said, not every foster parent wants to adopt, so the search process then takes place. And you know what that looked like. They're looking to meet, you know, family needs, cultural needs. We talked about the goals that the Children's Aid has for permanency planning, and what they expect to kind of get to those goals. And again, we talked a lot about openness in adoption. There's a whole other video on that, so I'm not going to touch on that too much now, because this video is already getting long. But even once a child goes on to be adopted, keeping lines of communication with existing family open. So we talked a lot about that as well. We talked about finalizing adoption and moving to a new neighborhood, moving to a new school, how all of this affects the children. So, you know, this week was really talking about how to continue relationships no matter what the permanency plan ends up being. Maintaining familiarity for that child and why that's so important. That was the big focus of week 6 of our Pride training. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, leave them down below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you're new here. If you're not new here, welcome back, and thank you so much for watching. But I will see you guys all on the next one. Thanks. Bye.